Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Line of Duty review. And we're back in the flow now, so we're on episode 3 of season 3. Sorry, no, episode 2. That's not a good start. Episode 2 of series 3. So we have
Right, I'm back. Sorry guys, that countdown sequences the animal iPhone
we're
wasn't
still
actually
getting
coming
used
back.
to
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, that countdown sequences the animal iPhone ever pull is proper. And that's how I wasn't appearing on screen. So yeah, as I'm sure it said just before the page and the title sequence we're on series 3 the second episode. So just before we get into the character and development and what points Charlotte where you an initial thoughts of this episode? So,
Yeah, it's definitely. I preferred this one more than the previous episode. You could tell that the first episode was set up, and now they've got a lot of that out the way. We can go a lot more into what are going to be the main storylines for this season, whether that's old storylines, and that's all I'll say until we get to it, sort of coming back, of obviously because of the cliffhanger and what happened in the last episode, we are now going a lot more into Danny, and I think we're starting to get the interesting start of the thread of his story. And a lot more Stephen, Kate, and Dot. Actually, I forgot how much Dot starts to come into his own this episode, and that actor especially. So I'd say I like this more. It's still, you can tell the beginning, we're just getting started, but it's a good sort of starting your engines sort of episode.
see, to be honest with you, man, so, um, 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 and so, what's in the episode, like, based on the combination that it was the last episode. So there was a big improvement, but the big sort of the kill yeah this episode is that it focused on Orton as a character and how he he is as a character because but recently in other episodes that we've covered in the channel, they've only scratched to the surface and was but this I feel is getting properly and how shade he has character has.
Yeah, no, it's sort of now he's getting settled, isn't he, into AC-12, and you'd think, oh, that
Um,
means he's safe,
yeah.
but you can see he's starting to make precautions
Mhm.
to protect his back, and you're starting to
Yeah.
see that. I think you're starting to see in this episode how he's got and lived so long in the type of role he has, because
Yeah.
you're seeing that with Kate. I think a lot in this episode, the start of what he does to sort of worm his way into groups and into sort of the good graces of people.
Yeah. Mhm. Um, so then, and for the episode ends, so faithful. Like, so, can, I'm trying to give, I'm trying to give all during CPR, but it's basically we can but it at this point to the essential way, but it's to in last episode an essential way for us to break the episode to is with all during skill or and 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 I figured this to how he's and as to how he's that's oh, it happened to be.
Yeah, but before that, because this basically picks up straight away, doesn't it? There's no
Yeah,
sort of a week later or a day later. It basically picks up this episode straight from the shot, and you
yeah,
sort of see in real time, like you said, Danny on the floor and his team's reaction, because Kate basically gets them all together, doesn't she? And
yeah,
is sort of in her undercover role. She's now starting to do what we know she does, and she's asking questions, and
yeah,
she's basically trying to get a story out of them, like, oh, because she was downstairs, which I think is important. She didn't see anything; she just heard the shot, so she's sort of like the audience, isn't she, at this point? And
yeah,
she's like asking questions, and it's this idea of what happened, and she sort of gets a few bits of information that come out later, which are important, which is Harry radio called Danny in like a sort of there's something up type of fashion to get him to go up the steps, and she makes that known, which comes up later, and
yeah,
and she said this, and she heard no struggle. She didn't hear a fight. She didn't hear anything to explain why Danny got shot. So those are sort of the things that come up later are important. I think that's sort of established in the first couple of scenes, doesn't it?
yeah. And then, yeah, and Harry comes across autism often shade, yeah, the other, and he because his because it's just heighten interesting on above it, because he was more the I will then the first episode, but I will just starting to read I there was more that met the eye of his character.
Yeah, he's definitely coming out of his shell, isn't he? Like he was very
Yeah,
much, like you said, portrayed in one fashion.
mhm,
And that's what's interesting about this episode. You see his team, how do they act when Danny's off the board? And Harry almost sort of assumes the leader role, doesn't he?
yeah,
Which you wouldn't expect, because he was sort of very much bullied almost by Danny, wasn't he? He was in sort of meek and
yeah,
mild. And he's sort of the one saying, like, right, this is what we're going to do. He's basically taking up Danny's sort of post as sort of the glue, isn't he, that keeps them all together.
yeah. So and so and so it ends up with a film audience instead of getting them reviewed as I've said, and it's an interesting sort of format. Who's the kind of well, I saw the um kind of well, I saw them of used together and together and like the and sort of see, and so every time I questions I ask, it keeps well, I came back to the extent um to the extent of use all them of use of kindness. Well, I stinted them and part of because so
Yeah, and I think it's almost to sort of signify the disarray the team are in, isn't it?
I
It's sort of a nice shorthand, and that's what this show does very well with the direction. Because I'm a type that I don't notice it direction a lot unless it's really really good, and in this show I notice it because they very much, like I said, it's sort of manic, isn't it? And you can feel the team are sort of fraying a lot.
yeah
But like I said, from all those bits, you get basically the new story, which is that Danny shot himself, and that's what they're all saying in different ways, basically.
um but you say shut up himself, but I think we can say that um and and there um and there also particular in some of the responses and Harry gives with any it's an obvious because he's in that show he shows them all shows them all what shows them all what I basically um as to how the well you as how the oh you the all during what shot basically.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
have like it's like a body diagram, isn't it, to where the shot went, and it's
I,
close to his
uh,
chest, going upwards. So they were sort of
yeah,
like saying that's pretty impressive to shoot yourself that way. Like if it's the
yeah,
way that they were all talking, without being too graphic, you would think of a headshot. You'd think of something a bit more clear
yeah,
if it was basically him killing himself.
yeah.
But, and then as soon as that says, then they sort of shift story a bit, don't they?
And and so all and I'm saying that they tried to wrestle the honor and 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 this is the part where and this is the part where he stands and asks him, I didn't get honest of of state if that was the case, and I can't remember how Harry informed you that Caesar response, but it was just a sort of bullshit and a bullshit response and this didn't
He
yeah,
basically said,
okay. Yeah,
I watched it today, and this is why I watch them on the day now because the little details I remember a lot easier. He basically said the shock of seeing Danny do that meant he froze. And it's that thing. I think the line something to the effect of, "You always think you're going to act, but when it happens to you, you don't." So the sort of all the shock that froze them, and Hastings is very like, but he was your teammate. Like, why did you not at least do anything? And that was what was telling, wasn't it? There was no attempt to help him by any of them. And Kate obviously saw that as well when she went up.
Kingdom makes an estimate and the use of an because he that he senses something that something doesn't add up and particularly if Harry and he's a bit more hostile too and hostile too and Harry and some of the
I think they bring up basically what he said to them, don't they? Say you've gone from saying
the chance I've taken the assistant of you. He says he can't really as I can't testify against them. Oh, so making is so and basically incredible. His sister Asha Sahara.
Yeah, because it's gone from like they can't testify to being willing to wrestle a gun from him. It just doesn't quite add up. Like, and I think Ted very much senses that. So his instinct is to arrest them on suspicion, but that doesn't last for long.
Yeah, because Joe, the supervisor that is and then just as the episode comes up into the office and she says evidence is not going to be of the Holton the Holton us. So he's still he's things and stirrups and arm or this or a hold or on the hold off in the nation's hold in old children's and go on.
Yeah, and she also interestingly, and this is why I think you're obviously now we're seeing a bit more of Jill. It's interesting that she was basically saying, "Oh, you need to put them back on duty." Last episode, and now she's saying, "Oh, their federation like representatives and lawyers are saying they got put on duty too quickly."
Yeah,
and even Ted says, "Well, that wasn't my idea, was it?" Like he sort of says, "Well, that's your idea. You're the one who pushed for it."
Yeah.
And she's very quick to sort of be like, it's almost she does it in a way that it sounds like she's accusing Ted of it when Ted was the opposite. It was her. So you're starting to see sort of her sort of manipulative, I think, sort of side this early on of Jill in this moment.
Yeah, and like essentially, like essentially, also is says, he's hadn't and he's hadn't think about looking um looking into looking into old students and and also he also like I'm so I'm so like I'm so when it's up to on on to go and to go again into old students accidents.
Yeah, and I don't think you're starting to see Steve, obviously, because they were locking her horns last episode. I think you're starting to see Steve sort of want as well to find out what was going on with Danny, because that one of the best scenes from the last episode was them talking about running, and I think as soon as Steve had that conversation, he clicked. There's something more to this. There's something more to the person he shot, and there's just something not right, and I think he could sense that. So Steve very much for the rest of the episode is going in, sort of following that gut instinct, isn't he had.
And so and so and so on and so on and so on was in and so on important was in a house and the basic skill the and basic skill we discovered that all kids all children had um, all children had to task on a dedicated all them dedicated them off in last episode and so he gets up there to find out who the og and who the og bill almost the interestingly enough you and he's in the home yeah to the ups you've got Orton and Orton is came down, looking through the jitter horse and then evidence and in notices that another addressed and addressed Eve and Eve and old children had addressed woman last episode.
Yeah, and it's not so much the envelope, it's what's in it, which sets Dot off, to put it lightly. Because it's a list of names.
And it's the question on the names as has on the hunt. I don't know which was the like and the very first series, but there's also the office the old drink out and green means we haven't actually that we haven't actually offered to yet. So
So obviously you got the interest now from the audience. Why is Tommy's name on a list of these two with the brothers? I think they are. I can't remember off my head. And also the fact that Tommy's crossed out
yeah.
alongside the Murphys. So it's like it's a clue. It's a proper little detective sort of moment, isn't it? Of why we got a list? Why is it important enough that Danny was going to send it to Steve, and that he probably had to do horrible things to Murphy to get some of that information? Is the inference as well, isn't it?
Anyway, so anyway, so you see that this sort of pattern set and more I think as well. So he kind of ups with the deal as as well, although as something to do as the so much for
Spoilers
mm-hmm,
until we get there.
mm-hmm.
And then obviously, I think the next scene is also quite an important one for Dot, considering what his next move is, basically.
Oh yeah, Becca. Um, oh yeah, oh yeah. Cousin wants to try and get me on a then sort of Ozzy up and power. Yep. I thought about similar to what he did with him. Even oh, last them series.
Yeah, so this is what I mean. You're starting to see his patterns. You're
Mm-hmm,
starting to see how he's managed to be a bent copper the way he is, be such a high profile part of the criminal element, and be police. And that's that he's a chameleon. He can change. He can be a different personality, and he's very good. It comes across to me at identifying who's the strongest bet at that moment to sort of make teams with. And he's obviously picking Kate. So he basically says to sort of Steve, "Oh, you're dealing with the Danny angle. I'm dealing with Kate's undercover. So I should take over the liaison." So it very much is pushing Steve out the picture, isn't it?
yeah, actually, um, um, after that was actually funny. It kind of made the chuck. That it kind of made the chuck. Uh,
Yeah, and it's another little show, this dry sense of humour this show has.
so um, so he essentially he buys a coffee and maybe basic maybe basic skill. He asks or all Jaren said and all Jaren said um before it the insecure
Yeah, because now
and
he knows Danny knew Tommy.
mhm,
So he's trying to get out of her, isn't he? And it's sort of Kate's
yeah
not giving anything away. But I don't know, how do you, I read it as she quite liked the attention a little bit off Dot with the sort of, because he compliments her as well. He doesn't just do the coffee thing. And I think she comes across a little bit like sort of being flattered maybe by it a little bit.
but see, here's the thing, I kind of get where you're coming from after that, but she's an experienced on on of an officer, so like by somebody ran the, he wanted to sort of out the opera like that. Wouldn't he be a bit sort of
Yeah, but
suspicious
he's
of
not just a random
that?
bloke. This is, do you know, when some people are like, oh, like what? Why is it important he's in AC-12? This is why it's important he was in AC-12 because it makes him seen as one of them. So anything he does is not going to have the same level of suspicion. If he was another team doing that with her or trying to get information, yeah, I think she would be. But he's seen as Dot. He's seen as one of a work colleague. If you think about it, and that's why that's why he was. I think he took the position because he understood he could keep an eye on them and that they were dangerous almost.
So whereabouts are we?
So now we pick up with the dog. Now we get doggy lead because
Oh
PC.
yeah.
Say the woman's name, which is terrible. The PC that Steve contacted rings back and says, "Oh, I've got an address. Binger. That's it. PC
Yeah, I can't actually pronounce her name. I'm terrible with pronunciation.
I
But
think it's Binger. I'm probably butchering it, but basically she calls
yeah.
back and says, I've got an address for that dog."
So and so gets out in a house. And I know, and just as soon as he sees the board, he, um, and I thought it was going to work similar and similar up to this, here it's the series, um, here it's the series, and for now, here, here, um, here, it's essential to come up and
Yeah.
your side and see, and you see his reaction to that. It's the same sort of reaction, so you can kind of read that he's a bit sort of skill.
Well, I don't know if it's squeamish. I think that was shock a lot with the series one, what Gates did. But I think, and we obviously they don't go into like a really close up, but we see the body, and it's pretty apparent that this wasn't a clean death. This was a really prolonged, painful death. And I think it's the state of it because later on we learn the state it was in the body.
Yeah, I'm
So
going to
I
have,
think it sort of
yeah,
it makes sense his
and
reaction.
yeah, and I'm going to have a big careful because it's me. And it's, well,
Well, folks, we're going to probably
what
just have to use very generic terms when the actual autopsy comes in later.
yeah, uh,
But also,
um,
we don't know how long the body would have been there. Would it be like a day?
I would guess maybe I would guess maybe a couple of
Yeah, so
days.
the smell would be pretty rank. So it makes sense, but I like that it gives it a little bit like a little humanizing moment
Yeah,
because we see in so many shows that it's just like, oh, it almost doesn't register, does it? The state
yeah,
of like a murder victim or a body. But in this, you
and
see,
yeah, also as well, um, also as well, ahead has been out of office. Also, this has been probably the most j- jabber ass making sort of violent if if nothing till
Yeah, which
this
then just
point.
adds more mystery to what on earth was the connection to Danny and this fella and the first
So,
victim.
yeah.
It just, I think I didn't sort of say this at the beginning, but I think this episode is a lot of really, really well sets up the sort of, you really want to know more about Danny, don't you? And sort of
Yeah.
his backstory. And this is just sort of the start of that.
See, like, I mean, because I guess we need to get back to the office. I mean, you start to see through through all children's past and like and like also office world like on the and 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 then and both watches and you're like, oh my god, I know what's happening in here. I'm not going to
Well,
say
but
because
yes,
it's
but
a
you've got
kid
to
don't want it.
remember when
Yeah.
this was broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people's thoughts would have been so close
Yeah.
to maybe what they are now.
Yeah.
We've got to
Mm-hmm.
remember that we're reviewing this now, but these came out
Yeah.
like years and years ago, like the
Yeah.
earlier series of Line of Duty.
Yeah.
But there's another thing basically. They go through his belongings, don't they? Sorry, no. And as part of the search at Danny's house, they got a receipt for a storage unit.
Yeah. And um, I know get this. We get these to people that haven't actually seen in the episode. Before the I'm a kid of this shit. And I'm after the fact of get you think essence as to what the story journal contains of each and never of head.
Which is also another brilliant bit of acting from Martin. The
Yeah,
discovery of that.
oh yeah, because it's similar, um, because it's similar to the, because it's similar to the action to what he kind of observed when he sees the rest of the board. It's that same sort of stuff, and it's that same sort of similar of the action.
Well, I think it's more his acting's better before he finds the head, because you as soon as he sees the little like container, he's had the thought that God, this is probably going to contain what I think it is, and you can see Martin's acting in that moment. You could feel the sort of dread and the fact that he's like, I have to open this box, but I don't want to because I'm
And
probably going to
yeah,
hate what's in it.
I mean, I mean, I mean, because just before he opens it, he's like that. Oh my God! I'm going to have to open. I, I'm going to have to open that. So he's essentially I can
Yeah,
before he
before he
opens.
opens it. So that's what I like about Martin. He's very good at these sort of low key little
Yeah.
scenes. And then we also, which is another just added thing, is he then phones his girlfriend.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And yes, yeah, and he says more. Okay, um, okay to have you because they only like kids did and was to like a local school year actually kiddo all during the status us and the shots in and a the basic kill maybe that's getting or this is hell relationship that is and stuff yeah and yeah some as well because I've not heard I've not heard from none of you Asian that kinda is what sparks the one oh in a sense.
Yeah, and I think it's such another little scene, but considering what the next chunk of the episode's about, it's very much important for setting up that Steve is in Matthew.
Oh Jesus
Matthew,
oh shit
we shouldn't laugh.
oh Jesus I'm surprised he's not been cancelled yet.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming. No, but it's a good scene for setting up also where Steve is. That he's in a stable relationship. That he's happy. That he's got that sort of. He's not. He's no longer flirting with everything. He's no longer like being very loose and fancy free. He's actually got this girlfriend, and he's very happy for that, which is important for what happens next. I think.
Yeah, because you get the tunnel into and
I was so surprised I didn't get a message from you. I was waiting for a message. Well, I was like, Daniel's going to have Denton coming back this episode.
see I can't see I kinda had that you and she would up back up again so that's kinda how you never got what I mean
Oh,
message
okay.
because I kinda got the feeling in that I kinda got the feeling in that she would do a turn at some point and obviously in the series with a view the only thing is so I wasn't expecting it to be like um so soon if that makes
Yeah, no, that's
sense.
true. But I think this is what I mean by the first episode. They almost had to be very setting up just the current story because they always are going to come back to Fred. And this is once again them coming back to a Fred.
See, kind of sort of, and kind of sort of for arguments this episode because again,
A little bit, yeah.
you see, because you kind of, see, because you kind of having to process the whole sort of old drinking connection to hunt and Orton and Rand. We know you getting and all of it so you are having to sort of get out your um your you fit son and now I was kind of getting a bit sort of confused at this point.
Oh no, I think that makes sense. But once you get into the trial, because you learn Steve's basically he's here to give that you learn because there's a lot of detail, but this is sort of the summary. Is basically she's managed to get a retrial for what she got accused, what she got words. don't say accused of, she went to jail. Basically, she's a retrial. That okay, just states a retrial. So it's all the evidence and what happened last series now is being put under the microscope again, which is when Steve comes into it.
Yeah. Um. And because he kind of hoped that he hadn't have and that he hadn't have if he sitting and won't again because a house art and how and that if him and that tips yes so and I'm not sort of questioned about um um about the purpose of what I um about the purpose of the other operation and hence and then about time at a house and basically he was and asked about educating me what's in the conversations in the pocket like and he said if he had the jotted and if he had the jotted down the conversations and he would spy on the pocket because she's aren't they?
Yeah, there's sort of two main threads, isn't there? Is how close were you to Denton? Did you cross a line professionally? Because as undercover, you cannot, which is very self-explanatory and obvious. You can't have a sexual relationship with the person you're sort of undercover investigating, and also the money, like the way the money was discovered in her house, and how basically from AC12's side it's peculiar how much she fixated on the mum's belongings, and that's what made them look and find the money. But then Denton's lawyer is arguing, and even Denton, when she takes a stand, she says, I was very emotional and I was really distraught, and that's why I fixated on my mother's belongings. See you, Sadaki, thank you. Yeah, she sort of played it as a normal grieving daughter, basically wanting their mother's belongings back. So you sort of see her side versus AC12's and Steve's side in this sort of these couple of scenes you get.
And for essential and for essential when she exists and she like of of having a relationship of like June has an overall operation, so she's basically trying to and so she's basically trying to that so that she's um so that the what was sorry for her in a sense and she's
What she's good at, isn't she? Let's put it that way. And and also somebody else who's in there is Sam, Steve's girlfriend, which is interesting for later on.
oh jeez.
What? Matthew, are you actually trying to kill us tonight with all these? Which one's it me?
Yeah.
I cough when I laugh still.
Yeah. Oh my god, I tell you what, you can come on and join us for the next Stimulus review, that would be fun.
Oh, YouTube would hate us even more than they already do. We got enough with you. We got enough with you, mate. We don't need to add.
Because I think we're going to come on.
Girlfriend questioned him in the car afterwards, basically saying, "Did you do anything you shouldn't have?"
Yeah, but she comes a kind of she's a bit of a irritable person because
I wonder what you're gonna say.
well because um and essentially because for them the bits and pieces that they find out oh she's not exactly this skilled
Well, yes, but at this moment, we just know her as his girlfriend, and
yeah,
I
but
think
I mean, yeah, but they, and it take, um, um, and it take, I'm so young, I'm so, I'm so young, I'll put getting off me,
I think it's more to do with she basically sees him as guilty, doesn't she? Before, and he's like, "Say no, I didn't do anything like that," and she's basically just saying, "Well, I know you did," and it's sort of like, okay, like you're automatic, which is, and this is what's I think interesting about this story thread is it's sort of I think it's purposely playing on what Steve was set up as in series 1 and 2. It's so it's sort of as the audience member, you go, well, Steve's swearing blind he didn't do it, and we know Denton's a manipulator. We know she can lie through her teeth. But then the back of your head, you're going, yeah, but we know what Steve was like the last 2 series. So this is what like I said. This is what I really love about this show is that a lot of things don't feel wasted. Like all that character setup for Steve we got is now informing a lot of what's going on in this thread with Denton. Yeah, so now it's Ted. Now we actually get a bit of Ted actually getting a few scenes because he's sort of been left out.
So yeah, yes, that's it until it goes on. I can t- um I can
Oh no, you're,
resolve
you're
this.
skipping. You're skipping.
Oh yeah, sir.
Now he gets the file, and this is another thing with Jill. Basically, the file that sorry, the file before that had loads of stuff blacked out that they couldn't access. Basically, Jill just magically gets for him and sort of snaps her fingers and is like, "Oh, here's sort of something because I've been a bit harsh to you. Here's what I'll sort of give you as a bit of a nice positive. Here's this file you've been trying to get."
Now, as I saw, because as I saw a moment in that scene, if the bank is going to cheat me, I used to keep him and then very sort of what for friends, you know that Ari doesn't exactly get either. Also, if Frankie's going to keep this,
Yeah, because she basically
if
sort of smiles at him, gives him
that's
a smile, doesn't she? And he's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you can. I'm offering you dinner," and it's very blatant what she's offering, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And he sort of, like you said, you sort of have that moment of, "Oh, is he going to?" But he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then Walden's old squad meets up, and this is when you're going to start to see Ron, your favourite actor. Sort of, you're starting to see him unravel now.
Yeah, I'm like you don't annoy me as much.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
yeah, so we had the opposite, and his acting still wasn't good. But he still held the up. It's in the episode, so he still wasn't annoying. So yeah,
So it's sort of you're starting to sense that he's getting a bit of the loose cannon now, isn't he? That you thought it was Harry last week,
yeah,
or Henry. Sorry, I probably got the name wrong. No, it's Harry,
Harry,
and now this week it's him. And then I sort of skipped ahead. This is when Denton, we go back to the trial and we sort of see her play the mother angle, don't we?
yeah, um, so and yes, so basically she's did you say about Lincoln?
Yeah, so basically I skipped ahead a bit. Now we go back to
Yeah,
Denton and she's talking about her reaction to wanting her mother's belongings.
yeah.
The important thing is she claimed two things,
Oh
new
yeah,
bits of information
oh
that
yeah.
she
Oh yeah, yeah. She killed him. Never, but I deny and give when the but I was of it.
so that's like another sort of, and
Yeah,
I suppose in hindsight, when you look back, you think, no, he didn't actually seem that surprised, did he?
yeah,
He was quite calm and collected. So it makes you think back to that scene, and also something that she reinstates she never saw the money, which as an audience we know is a pack of lies
yeah.
because we know that she got that money from, oh, I can't remember the woman's name. The woman who died. We know she'd seen the dirty money and it
Yeah,
wasn't just planned.
Jamie kills.
Yeah. So that's another, but obviously it's part of her little scheme. You can see now that she's fully setting Steve up. She's fully sort of
Yeah,
making him become the fall guy, isn't she now?
and 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 so it ends up he gets called and he in his office and st- and his he student asks Emma have a relationship with after the case went on. Um, so
Now it's sort of, did
yeah,
you do more than you should have? And
yeah,
why weren't you surprised? And then we learn
yeah,
another thing that Steve did, which was incredibly stupid.
yeah. Uh, um, and and yeah, he never he did so that he was surprised the kind of and and the kind of give that a reason so to
Yeah, because this is when we now learn that the money was found before
Yeah.
Lindsay came into the house. It'd already been found, but Steve basically, in a moment of showing off, wanted
Yeah.
to surprise her, so acted like it had just been found in that moment.
Yeah.
And he admits to this, and it's sort of once again you're seeing a sort of that old streak of him having to be the big man, him having to sort of be the flashy sort of detective that he likes to be now and again.
Yeah. And so got back to okay. We should have said something as soon as the case would be. We should have said something as soon as the case was found.
Yeah, and Hastings even says like we you've just given away. He used a football analogy, doesn't he? Like
Yeah. We've
he
just
just gave a
given away
penalty
a
away.
penalty. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's sort of saying like we had her, and because of your showmanship, we could now lose this. Like she could get out is the inference because of the way you were.
And, and yes, and so and yet some party some and some it's party and some and it's party and some and it's party or and 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 Australia
Yeah, and this is when Harry sort of we've saying we keep seeing sort of this more layered, different personality to Harry, and this is when you fully sort of see that he's not this meek character. Ron is freaking out because sorry, Kate got to him. We didn't say that, and I didn't write that down. Kate basically said, "Oh, is it worth you going to prison, like covering for these two?" So you can see Kate's got into his head, and he's now fully freaking out. And Harry's sort of the calm one. He's very, and even when Ron pushes him, because he like I said, Ron's the bigger bloke, isn't he? He's a bit more built. He's a bit more. He can use his physicality almost like Danny did. And the fact that Harry gets pushed, and then it just sort of ends there, and you sort of have that moment of, oh God, what's going to happen next?
yeah.
We know Harry's a lot more dangerous now than we first thought.
And yeah, so he essentially like I know I'm jumping ahead here, but over from the past episode to that he get his on a phone, so like he get and like he get as though he toss in really get some other answers heavily involved with Orton's capital. So I could be based on the evidence that we've already seen.
And then we get the next scene, which is when you think, oh, okay, Harry's very dangerous because you find the body of the next team member. Basically, that they're dropping like flies a bit now. This is the second one, and that's been made to look like that was self-inflicted as well, which matches what they were all saying to do with Danny. That,
Yeah.
so you're starting to see a pattern now, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
possible murders are being covered up to be look like they're self-inflicted.
Yeah.
And now you sort of see the whole sort of all the little secrets that have been hinted at with that crew are now starting to fully come out, aren't they?
And Jackie and Odd is and Jackie and Odd is well had the relationship is also that that's been revealed as a connection between both well.
And it does explain why there was the tension there that we saw last episode between them all. So you find out that Jackie had a one night stand with Danny when she was in a relationship with Rod. And it sort of, you can sort of see that this sort of team was just almost waiting to explode, wasn't it? You get that sense now that it wouldn't take a lot for sort of one thing to set them off. So it just, once again, you're going back to like, how did Danny die? Who did it? But now that they all obviously have to come back in for interview.
So I'm like, I can't really remember off the top of my head the questions, but it was just basically, yeah, up to the previous inning of year.
Yeah, but the important thing is now Harry is saying that basically Rod went for Danny. So it's gone from, oh, we had to all wrestle the gun from Danny and Danny did it himself.
And you find out that because of odds and odds, the other are sort of, the what because of you on that says easiest tip back in the book, but when I think so.
Yeah, and it just, the fact that they've changed the story so many times in one episode now, this crew, you sort of are just thinking like, what on earth is going on? Because we still don't know who killed Danny. Like, that is still a question by the end of this episode. We can guess, we can sort of see from the two who are left who's most likely, but you still don't know.
Yeah. So and to get in this Harry gets hand eaten the a phone is a belief with about and there's that I from the us there really to see back to
I don't know. I had to like watch that moment. I had to basically put it back and re-listen because it's a very distorted voice, isn't it? And you just see like a hand, don't you, on like a payphone.
Yeah.
My gut, my guess is that could have been Dot, because we know he had access to the burner phones.
It could be. Actually,
So I don't know. It's not really said who it is.
Yeah.
But basically, it's sort of like you're still in debt to us. You still have to do something because you've messed up.
Yeah.
Which I think it's very heavily hinted that he killed Ron. And that's what now he's being told you've messed up.
Yeah.
We're sort of out saying it. And we sort of have two main. He sort of has two. We sort of have two main scenes left, don't we? And that is Lindsay practicing her lines, and that's what it is. She's practicing. She's trying to sort of gauge what reaction or what voice.
Yeah, I mean, so she always tries to go for the Oscar winning performance and tends to
Yes,
try
it's sort of,
to
it's
say,
quite funny because obviously she's full of tears, isn't she? And then a noise happens in the cell. Like obviously, I don't know what makes the noise, but as soon as that noise, it's like, oh, she's normal, and the tears are just off.
yeah,
So it's sort of just showing, like we said, how good of it's. I think it's a reminder almost just how clever and manipulative this woman is.
yeah, and so more than next scene be on ahead of us. Music,
Yeah, and you can sort of another, like I said, the acting. I can't think of which is bad. I should know the actor's name because I've seen him in interviews and he's quite a funny chap.
yeah,
Hi, Master. Hi,
yeah,
PJ. Nice to see you.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and they basically on the as typically knows the as to the implicates his involvement in
well,
the
I think
works.
it's just that you can tell
So,
with Dart, like the
yeah,
net's just getting close, like tighter and tighter, isn't it? Almost.
yeah,
And all his links are just sort of he's scared to death of them being exposed. So he's just sort of a bit like a rabbit in headlights, just trying to
yeah,
stop any possible link to him. And that's sort of not as much of a cliffhanger, obviously, compared to the last week, but that's our sort of ending scene.
yeah, it's the, I mean, I mean, it's up everything for like the majority of the show on over and I said, and so yeah, I seen now is rather than be in a background character, he becomes so like the main sort of okay. It's now because it is before it was it is before it was that is the main focus and it's him that's the main sort of character that you're interested in and more about that that's the yeah I'll put it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's sort of a lot of characters. Like I said, obviously Jill gets a lot more to do with this episode. There's a few more characters that are sort of you're getting more and more. Oh yes, and we didn't. Yes, Matthew, we sort of skipped that the body, but I think that will be more relevant as we go more into Danny's background.
Yeah, because essentially there's injuries to the arteries, and I'm not even going to begin to phrase the second bit of that
No,
because YouTube
let's
won't
just say
like it.
this was a highly personal attack.
Yeah,
It wasn't just let's kill the guy, it was let's be very precise with the type of pain we want to give him, and that's all we'll say.
and, and, and I just want to apologize mentally for the stream to people in the chat that had to you up an absolute arse. Who just ignore all of them. He hasn't had um he hasn't had anything agent to see him Ivy years and it's the reason why I'm trying to uh, write different things in my channel because I'm sick of them nonsense. But anyway, guys, give me just and give me your scores for this episode in the chat and I'll read to them out. But like you guys are doing and the I'll shall give us. What?
See, I can't remember what I gave it last week because I'm a bit tired. So I'll have to try just go. I think did I give it a 6 last week?
Yeah, you gave it a 6.
Right. So this is better. Like I'm trying to gauge off that a bit. This is better. Like I said, this is the beginning of the series, and I once again know what happens, and
Yeah.
so I sort of I'm sort of without spoiling, keeping my really really high scores to what I know happens near the end. So I'll give this an 8. I think because, like I said, it really makes Danny's background interesting.
I
the
will
sort
give it, yeah. Um, carry on, sir.
and
Oh,
the sort
sorry.
of Danny's squad that were quite plain in the first episode, they're definitely more interesting this episode. There's sort of a lot more for them to do, like you were saying. You sort of see them unravel and sort of blame each other, and the sort of I think Harry's quite an interesting character. Like we said, that evolution of him from the first episode. I like that Steve. You're starting the building off his sort of faults we know he has, and now coming to haunt him. And Denton's just such a. As soon as I remember watching this the first time, and as soon as I didn't think Denton was coming back. So when I watched her back, I was just like, oh, things are going to get fun. Like things are going to get really interesting now. So yeah, I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, I will give it an 8 as well. So it's a pretty strong improvement because I gave the last episode the year from
Yeah,
Carolina.
a
So,
very big improvement for you.
so it's a pretty strong improvement. And as well, I kinda like to know, and I kinda like to know the reaction to what is unclearly eaten a fan for the show because you've been around this and um on on Garcia pop you
Oh, the
or sort of
fandom loves her.
character.
The fandom absolutely loves her, and you can tell every sort of villain, as now you can see that's the formula for the series is sort of measured against her. You can tell she's sort of the benchmark.
Yeah.
So and for a good reason, like we said. And all I'm going to say is, I was right when I said when I first watched this, things are going to get fun and very interesting now that Denton's back on the scene.
Yeah, so Matthew gives it a 9 out of 10. He also says I wasn't a guest fan in the episode the last time we reviewed an episode. Yeah, and what gave it
Gave
a
it away.
yeah. Mhm.
Might be the title of the stream. I don't know.
Yeah. So any more was was before we finish up.
We know, Sadaku will probably give his in the comments afterwards because he had to
Yeah.
go.
I'll just I'll this time filing wait for the chat to get if any more stuff you want to kill and
Well, Wendy
okay.
Godlover, we've spoiled it because she hadn't watched it yet, but she knew what she was getting into.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Wendy's going to watch this, she now says, after our stream.
Alright, okay. Alright, okay. So in terms of the next stream we doing next next Friday night you actually and so After the next stream, that's a week. And are on this channel and with episode and he um every on is August is other review of the year and and of the year in about is usual every every year and as I said before I'm not gonna let it's actually is up but I'm gonna achieve now will on the it's have run yes I will so to speak so the only way to sort of thing and to sort of thing it appeared for me in Charlotte to continue streams and occasion of creatures and Charlotte of either and by the way that she's walking in as an off stream so and so I'll get in and enjoy series uh, in a little because it's going to be a show anyway and I guess he's 50% is all heaven if and I find missing is a so T Davis but I cover because he's not only and the people so Charlotte anything else you would like to add before I shut the stream off and get both of my
Before your little Scottish battle cry. No, just that. Just remember, we have a community. Thank you to the chat as always. Wendy, Sudoku, Chris has popped in, PJ, anybody else I've missed, and we love you and we look forward to the next stream because you always make the streams funner.
Yeah. And hashtag no good is a shite show. Alright, but here's the trailer. Brett, here's the trailer. If I can find it.